Hello, viewers, and welcome to Africa and Beyond Television Network. We continue to look at what's happening in DRC. And remember that South Africa has accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, and the diplomatic relations between South Africa and Rwanda have turned sour. We have seen the president of Rwanda has come up clearly and has called out the South African president and has said, stop trying to intimidate me. And this is something which is very, very important, and we need to have this conversation in good faith. So we are going to start by listening to the chief defense chief of the South African National Defense Forces to hear the real position, because they are the ones with the people on the ground in DRC. Let us start by this one.
City of Goma, an area plagued by violence and instability for many years. The primary threat in this area comes from the rebel group that is alleged to be armed, supported, trained and accompanied by the Rwandan Defense Force. SAMI DRC conducted its mandated tasks and, in the process, faced intermittent bombardment from M23 throughout the year 2024. In response, our forces executed counter-bombardments. On the fateful day of 23rd January 2025, the M23 rebels launched a full-scale attack on our troops in an attempt to take control of Sake, aiming to gain access to Goma, the provincial capital of Eastern DRC. Fierce fighting ensued, and our soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery and determination. They successfully halted the M23 advancement and pushed them back, preventing the rebels from achieving their objective. However, this decisive pushback at Sake came at a great cost, resulting in the loss of 13 of our gallant fighters. Regrettably, on Monday, the 27th January 2025, several long-range mortar bombs were launched towards Goma Airport, with some landing in the South African National Defense Force base, leading to the loss of 3 additional South African National Defense Force soldiers. The families of the fallen heroes have already been notified, and plans are underway to repatriate the remains of our gallant soldiers back home to South Africa. Meanwhile, M23 reported suffering heavy personnel losses and subsequently requested SAMI DRC to hold fire so they could recover the bodies of their fallen members around Sake. We consented to this request. However, SAMI DRC set conditions, including a demand for the safe passage of injured soldiers to Goma for medical treatment. The South African National Defense Force, as part of SAMI DRC, remains steadfast in supporting all peace-building efforts aimed at addressing the escalating violence, finding peaceful resolution to the conflict, and averting a humanitarian crisis. At this painful moment, we lower our banners in honor of our fallen heroes and the ultimate sacrifice they have made. Their bravery in the face of danger has protected countless lives and upheld the values of peace and security that we strive to achieve.
So this is the position taken by the South African Defense Forces chief, and in his statement, he has lied a lot, and that does not help. When you are dealing with a regional crisis, it doesn't help to exaggerate things and lie. We know that the South African Defense Forces have surrendered to the M23 fighters. That is a fact. We know for a certain that DRC forces, some of them, they have sought refuge in Rwanda. And we know for a fact that they've taken over Goma. And there are also reports that the airport has been seized and is now under full control of the M23 fighters. That is the fact. And the defense chief didn't bother to talk about those issues and is running a propaganda campaign. However, we need to see what the government of South Africa has said, starting by the Foreign Affairs Minister, so as to understand the real position.
We are concerned that a danger exists or a possibility exists of a full-blown regional war. And it is for that reason that all the institutions of the AU and SADC, including East Africa Community, have made, all of them have a resolution of a tripartite engagement of all these institutions, the East Africa, the AU, SADC, a summit on the Eastern DRC. Because as we speak now, already there are forces coming from various groupings and angles. So you do need an intervention that is at the AU level, at the East Africa level, and also at the SADC level to reach a process of ceasefire, but also of long-term solution. The second one with regards to the war crimes, in terms of the resolution coming out of the UN Security Council, is that these are peacekeeping forces mandated by a Security Council resolution of the United Nations. They are also mandated through the SADC resolutions. So shooting or killing some of them, there are instances where such can constitute war crimes. And that's why the UN Security Council has issued this term warning to all the warring parties, factions that are fighting in the Eastern DRC, to cease to shoot the peacekeepers, but also to cease hostilities against ordinary civilians in the Eastern DRC.
This is what the South African government said through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or the International Relations Minister. But we need to note key issues right here, which they failed to deal with. We have had a problem where there are exceptions when it comes to the issues of war crimes. We have had civilians in countries like Zimbabwe being shot. These are unarmed civilians which have been shot at by the soldiers in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique. But we have never heard about these people or these forces facing war crimes. We have never heard about that. And the situation about the M23 is different because these are marginalized people. These are people who have been oppressed. These are people who have been attacked severally, who have chosen to use other means to liberate themselves. So to come and then label them, number one, rebels, it's a problem in itself. Number two, to say that whatever they're doing constitutes war crimes is another issue. Why can't you talk about the mercenaries who have fled the DRC right now? Why can't you talk about the DLR forces which were in DRC, you know, causing the mayhem, causing genocide and everything else? Why can't you talk about those forces? Why is it that these regional leaders, they always side with regimes which are failing and they don't talk sense into each other? So before we go to the next thing, let us hear what Julius Malema has said himself.
Ramaphosa wants to kill our children in DRC. Those rebels, what Shashara DRC, they are well equipped. Who goes to a base of an army if you know that thing is an army and is powerful? There's no army. So they are sent there to be killed because they are not properly trained. They must come back home, and we must stop with any military deployment until we are fit and proper. Just take a walk and look at a South African soldier walking. You see a demoralized man who's carrying a rifle, and you see that rifle is heavy on him. He's not even fit to carry that rifle. They killed it.
So Julius Malema is against the deployment of South African soldiers, in the sense that he says that the South African soldiers are ill-equipped to participate in wars like the one which is in DRC. And that is a fact. South African soldiers were deployed in Mozambique. They failed to stop the terrorists which were marauding villages in Mozambique, only for Rwanda to come and bring peace to that area. That is the fact. So when you look at it, you can actually see that South Africa is actually rushing to respond to issues which they do not understand. So let us take a look onto what Thabo Mbeki has said regarding the whole situation which is in DRC, so that we get clarity and context of the reason why there is a war in DRC.
We've been arguing with regard to the Great Lakes, not the Great Lakes, to the Eastern Congo. Is that there's a problem in the Congo which has not been resolved up to today. I'm talking about the DRC. We're back to that NDR I was talking about. As you know, part of the population in the Eastern Congo is Rwanda speaking, the Banyamulenge. Part of the problem in the Congo is that from the days of Mobutu, they refused to recognize that the Banyamulenge are Congolese. They might be Rwanda speaking, but these are Congolese. And it's the responsibility of any government in Kinshasa to look after this section of the Congolese population like any other. But you remember what happened during the Mobutu years. Mobutu took the position that these are foreigners. It's like the South Africans here saying, I mean, they're Tswana-speaking people here in the Northwest. And suddenly, the rest of the country says, those are not South Africans, they must go to Botswana. So what happened in the Congo case, that's how you had the Mai Mai emerge in the Eastern Congo. The Mai Mai were specifically targeting the Banyamulenge to drive them out of the Congo into Rwanda. But I'm saying it's the responsibility of the central government in the Congo to look after this population, which is Congolese. It's not Rwandan. It's Congolese. It's Rwandan speaking. That's the first problem. The second problem is that the administrative footprint of the government in Kinshasa does not reach the east. So you find a part is part of the country which has got a very light experience of being governed by the government in Kinshasa. The country is very big. So you have a weak government, weak imprint of the government on the east. It means other forces emerge and take over. You see the M23. You can't avoid the phenomenon of the M23 as the government of the Congo unless you say, we, the Congolese government, will protect the Banyamulenge because these are Congolese. If you don't say that, allowing other people to do as they wish towards the Banyamulenge, then M23 will continue to exist. Because they will get arms to defend themselves. So it's the same, it's that problem in the Kivus of that weak imprint of the government, and then goes up to the Ituri and then those areas. We discussed that with President Joseph Kabila. It's your responsibility to look after these people in the East. You remember during the negotiations here at Sun City, you had 3 armed groups. You had the government armed group, you had Bamba's armed group, you had the third one. It's led by an advocate, which was basically representing the Banyamulenge. It was agreed, it was part of the negotiators, it's Congolese, and no problem. Even after the conclusion of the negotiations, there were discussions about how to integrate them properly into the government of the Congo and all of that. But that process collapsed somewhere. So I'm saying, my brother, what we need to do with regard to the Eastern Congo is President Tshisekedi should say to everybody, I'm president of the Congo, and I'm president of all of the people of the Congo, including the Banyamulenge. And then they need to do whatever they can, the government in Kinshasa, really to improve its capacity to govern the eastern part of the Congo. The other thing we then did, my brother, in that context, we brought together President Kabila and President Paul Kagame to say, you need to govern your relationship in a particular way. Because part of the problem, as you know, is that the people who had committed genocide in Rwanda ran over to the Eastern Congo. And so the people in Rwanda are saying, those ones you are accommodating there, they are the ones who want to kill us. They've killed us already, they want to kill us some more. So how do you govern this relationship? So we negotiated an agreement, or let me say, they negotiated an agreement about how to interact with each other. Because you can't disentangle them, the Rwanda and the DRC. Agreed, and the thing was signed. I think it collapsed along the way. But you need that, you need those processes. As I was saying, the government of the Congo to take charge of the Eastern Congo, all of it. Then we need an agreement between the DRC, Uganda, and Rwanda in particular, to govern the relations among those three. I think that's what you need in order to resolve the problem in the Eastern Congo. Yeah.
So the biggest problem which SADC leaders are overlooking is that they are supporting the interest of Felix Tshisekedi, not the interest of the people of the Eastern Congo. If they were doing so, they could have understood the points being raised by Thabo Mbeki right here. But it's because the SADC leaders which we have, which are going to sit down to make a deliberation, they are all biased because they are all dictators. They all think the same way. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the masses. They care about themselves and they care about their own safety. So it's simple and easy for Tshisekedi to simply own up and become a president for all. Tshisekedi is failing to defend Congo. He's failing to defend the people of the Eastern Congo in particular. So if you look at how the South African government is addressing this issue, you know, they are too emotional. And that is the biggest problem, because you don't need to be emotional. You need to be factual. You cannot fight against the people who are trying to liberate themselves from a rogue government, from a government which has neglected them, which has let the people being marauded by terrorists. So I want to go into a statement from the Minister of Defense of South Africa.
We intend to just give you a sense of what is happening, what the challenges are, without going into details about other matters, because the situation is still very volatile and there are moving pieces. So for security purposes, I hope you will understand that there will be parts that we are not going to refer to. Currently, what I can say, I'm sure you will be quite aware that on the 22nd, there was complete hostilities that occurred in the DRC. And coincidentally, I happened to have been in the DRC on Wednesday last week. So I was in Kinshasa, and then we heard that when we were in Kinshasa, that's when we got information that there were attacks that happened at Sagi. No, it's Sagi. So Sagi is not very far from Goma. So then we flew to Goma, where we met the leadership of Summit DRC to get a full explanation as to what was happening, what were the issues, and what were the challenges. After meeting the Summit DRC leadership, which your force commander and their assistants, then we went to the Goma airport also to get information. That's where our strategic capabilities are, our special forces, our supplies that are there. But we also had an opportunity to visit all the injured soldiers who were in Goma at the Summit DRC facility, but some of them were at the United Nations facility. At that stage, our priority was to make sure that we go and, even before we came, the first thing we did was to make sure that we go and retrieve the injured in Sagi. With the UN, with the support of the UN, we flew in and removed all the deceased and the injured, and they were taken to Goma. That's why I said I had the opportunity to meet all the injured in Goma. And that's when we lost the 11. So from Goma, we went to MONUSCO, again in Kivu, to really also get a sense of what is happening, because we have your Summit DRC forces, we have the MONUSCO forces. The MONUSCO will be the forces that are led by the United Nations, and the Summit DRC are led by SADC. We also got an update and we left from there. So, as I said, the idea really was to come and speak to the media. We are ready to give, because there's still lots of loose pieces, we will give a proper rundown in terms of what happened when, one time. But currently, our position as South Africa, we've been meeting as the troop force contributing countries of Summit DRC, which is us, Tanzania, and Malawi, under SADC, to assess the situation. So on a daily basis, we've been meeting. On a 2-hourly basis, we get updates and reports of what is happening. But we also, as I say, we have also UNESCO forces which are under UNESCO. So under the SADC forces, we've been meeting as the Troika. We met the other night, but the general posture that we are taking as a Summit DRC is to force the parties to go into a peaceful negotiation. Because our sense is that that war is not going to be won through arms. It can be only won if people sit down and negotiate. So we have called for a ceasefire. I can assure South Africans that our camps have not been attacked for the past 48 hours, because unfortunately for us, when we were at Goma, your DRC forces were fighting Rwandan forces over our heads. That's where we lost the 3 people. So we had to quickly communicate with M23 to say, we're not part of the battle, so don't fight over our heads. And indeed, that's why then we agreed with them that we'll host a white flag to say, we're not part of the battle, we don't want to be dragged into it. But also, M23 needed a free passage to go to Sagi, to go and collect and retrieve their deceased people. So then we agreed on a ceasefire whereby they will get a free trade, a free passage. We will not fire at their movement, because if they move, we are not sure which direction. So there was a clear ceasefire which was agreed by the generals from M23 but also by our generals. So that process has happened. Even now, as I say, there's never been any attack since the ceasefire that we requested or we instructed from M23. The latest information that I got around 1 o'clock said there's intense fighting in Goma between your M23 and your DRC forces, and the place is completely tense and the difficulties. So that's why we're communicating after every 2 hours to check what the situation is, and that's where we are. But from our side, there's been no activity, there's been no attacks. As a country, we've just read, as I say, we keep on a 2-hourly basis to check.
So if you listen very carefully to what the Minister of Defense has said and to what the General has said, there are two different versions of this whole thing. The Minister is saying, we have not engaged the M23 as the SAMI DRC, which means she is denying attacking or fighting them. But the General is actually saying that the forces, the M23 fighters, were approaching Goma with the intention to invade Goma, and they fired at them, they fought with them, and they managed to stop them. That is what the General is saying. And the Minister is saying otherwise. This is the biggest problem which we have with SADC. SADC has gone into DRC not to maintain peace, but to fight a war. There are two different things. To maintain peace and to fight a war, there are two different things, which means that they were supposed to be facilitating the issues of maybe movement of aid, maybe communications, negotiations, whatsoever. But they were not supposed to be involved in direct combat with the M23 forces. That is the reason why you have seen, the moment they realized that they must not be part of this mess, the M23 forces have stopped fighting them or have stopped attacking their bases. So the real position is that the SADC fired first on the M23 fighters, and the M23 fighters fought back. And that is the reason why you have seen South Africa has lost 13 soldiers. It's because the M23 fighters probably responded back to the fire which was sent by the South African forces, according to the general of the South African Defense Forces, which is a very, very, very big problem. Then we have to ask questions. What is SADC doing in DRC? Are they not there to make sure that they facilitate negotiations? Because I have said there are two different scenarios here. First scenario, we have a scenario where there is a civil war in DRC. This is the scenario which is there. There is a civil war which is happening in DRC, which means whoever comes in should not take sides when there is a civil war. How are you going to deal with a situation where the other side finally wins the battle or wins the war or subdues the government which is there in Congo and takes over, and the people are in support of it? How are you going to then mend the relations with each other? Will the same people be able to trust you? No, because you have taken sides. But in the event that another country invades another country, it becomes a problem. So they are hiding behind Rwanda, this, Rwanda, that. But Rwanda is not involved, but Rwanda is simply defending its territory and its borders. And this area is very, very close to Rwanda. That is the reason why you have seen those who have surrendered, they simply crossed into Rwanda. They surrendered, and they are using Rwanda as the safe passage to leave. We have seen the FDLR mercenaries leaving through that route. We have seen so many groups leaving using that route. The biggest problem is that the SADC forces are fighting alongside the DRC forces, a grouping called FDLR, another group of mercenaries. Then it makes us question, why are you fighting alongside the forces which are not part of the government of Congo? If you are there to help Congo, why can't you fight alongside the Congo military only and not alongside the other forces? the forces which made the M23 to be bathed in Eastern DRC. So that is something which is very, very important. Before, in the past, when this conflict started in the past, there was what was called My group, which was attacking the Banyamulenge people, and they had to fight back. There were negotiations, the ceasefire was there, but the government of Congo continued to neglect the people of Eastern DRC. So they simply want the territory, they don't want the people in the Eastern DRC. That is the biggest problem. So I think that there is necessity for the South African government to note that whatever which is happening in DRC is wrong. Because in South Africa, they take care of everyone. You are white, you are colored, you are Indian, you are Venda, you are Soto, you are Tswana, you are whatever. They call you South African. But they don't want to preach the same gospel in DRC. They don't want to knock sense in the DRC president so that he understands that everyone is a citizen of DRC. That is the reason why we are having these conflicts. That is the reason why we are having these wars. So South Africa has become a problem in the region. Go to Mozambique. South Africa supported a government which was not elected by the people. A government are being rejected by the people right now. A government which is failing to govern the people of Mozambique right now is the same government which they went to support. What will be the end game? You will see the same situation which is happening in DRC. You will see it in Mozambique. You will see it happening. They have failed to govern Maputo for how many months now? They have failed to govern Mozambique as a whole for how many months now? The citizens are refusing to listen to the government because they say it's illegal. Instead of South Africa and SADC to go and resolve that issue, they can't. They'll wait to up until there is civil war in Mozambique. Each side having guns, that is when they will rush to go and stand in solidarity with a rejected government. And they will say we are protecting civilians. But they will not tell you that the same government which is in charge will be the one which is terrorizing citizens. The same happens in Zimbabwe. You have elections which are rigged. The people goes into the streets to protest. They are shot. And, you know, people are shot at randomly. The South African government is quiet. It comes to support that kind of government. They embrace each other and they even give the chairmanship to the same people who have been rejected by the people. So imagine what kind of a region are these people trying to build? They cannot tell each other the truth. They cannot stop escalations before they happen. Look at what is happening in Zimbabwe right now. There is a great danger that the situation in Zimbabwe might go the same way as in DRC, because those who are disgruntled, one day they will say enough is enough and they might fight back. If such a situation comes, then who is going to be affected? The people, the civilians will be affected. But the same South African government will take a position and will take sides. They will not look at it and say, these are internal conflicts. This is a civil war. That is the reason why we have a civil war and a war in general. A country attacking another country, yes, you might get help from other countries. But when in a country, when war breaks out in a country, you don't go to take sides. That is the biggest problem of South Africa. That is the reason why you have seen they have lost lives. It's because they have failed to actually adhere to the basic principles of peacekeeping. So this is what is happening, and it's a very sad situation. South Africa is there to protect the interests of Felix Tshisekedi, not to protect the interests of the people of DRC, and that is the biggest problem. Gono Creative says, was SADC fighting on the side of civilians or to support Tshisekedi's interests? A very, very brilliant question. They were fighting to support the interests of Felix Tshisekedi because they failed to come and deal with the basic issues of the interests of the people of the Eastern DRC. And this is the biggest problem which we have. And we want solutions. That is the reason why even African Union, they failed to bring peace to countries like Sudan, South Sudan. They've failed to bring peace in Africa. When there was need for African Union and all other regions to defend one another, they failed. Libya was invaded by another country. Did they go to Libya? No, they didn't. They were all scared. They were all afraid. But when it comes to the issues where vulnerable people are defending themselves, they rush to go and support the dictators and the looters. So I hope and believe that this matter will be resolved differently. What we need to note is that they have agreed the SADC mission right here in Zimbabwe, the SADC summit, is supposed to discuss much about having a tripartite conference where they're going to bring the leaders from the East Africa, from SADC, AU, and everyone else on board. But they must not leave out the disgruntled people. They must bring the people who are disgruntled, that is the M23 leaders. They need to bring them on board so that they hear the stories as they are and they bring real resolutions. Failure to do so, it is going to lead to more bloodshed, further escalation, and as usual, civilians will continue to leave their homes. Civilians will continue to die because they'll be caught in crossfire. So it is what it is. We will continue to watch closely and look at what is happening in DRC. It's a very, very sad situation, but we just pray that peace will prevail in the end.